"We need a mother," said the cowboy's daughters. Then they chose an Apache woman in chains. This story is perfect for fans of cowboy movies, Apache stories, Western drama, emotional shorts, and true love storytelling. Don't forget, like, share, comment, and subscribe for more powerful emotional stories. The iron chains clanked sharply as the Apache woman was dragged through the dusty street, every step scraping against the dry earth like a warning of what was coming. The midday sun burned down on her torn clothes and bruised skin, yet her eyes still held a fierce, unbroken fire that refused to bow. Townspeople gathered on both sides, whispering words filled with fear and hatred. Some called her a savage. Others said she was a murderer who had spilled the blood of a white trader. A thick rope was already tied to the wooden post in the center of the yard, ready for the hanging everyone believed she deserved. Near the edge of the crowd stood a quiet cowboy with two small girls holding tightly to his coat. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide, but not with fear of the prisoner, only with something deeper, something aching. As the sheriff shoved the chained woman forward, his voice rang out, ordering everyone to stay back. He warned them she was dangerous, that she could strike at any moment. The people obeyed, stepping away as if her pain itself could infect them. But then, without warning, the younger girl slipped free from her father's hand. Her small boots kicked up dust as she ran straight toward the chained woman. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted for her to stop, but she didn't listen. She reached the Apache woman and wrapped her thin arms around her waist as tightly as she could, pressing her face against the torn fabric of her dress. "Please, don't hurt our mother," the child cried, her voice shaking but brave. Time seemed to stop. The murmuring crowd fell silent. The sheriff froze mid-step, disbelief written across his face. Even the chains seemed to stop rattling. The older sister followed, her eyes filled with tears as she stood beside the woman and held onto her hand. The Apache woman looked down in shock, her breath catching in her throat. No one had touched her with kindness in so long that she didn't know how to react. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, the fierce fire in her eyes softened into something fragile and human. The cowboy pushed forward, fear and confusion battling on his face as he called his daughters' names. But neither of them moved. They clung to the woman as if she were their last hope in a cruel world. And in that single impossible moment, the entire town realized that something far greater than chains and accusations was standing before them, a bond that could not be broken, no matter how hard they tried. The cowboy's heart pounded as he stepped closer, his boots crunching on the gravel, his voice trembling as he called out to his daughters. "Lucy, Emma, come back to me," he pleaded, afraid that one sudden movement from the Apache woman or the sheriff could turn everything into tragedy. But the girls did not let go. They stood there, small and fragile in front of an armed crowd, holding on to the chained woman as if she were their only shield against the world. Tears streamed down Lucy's cheeks as she lifted her face to look up at the woman. "Our mama died last winter," she whispered, a voice so soft it barely carried through the air. "When it was cold and the snow came through our roof, you were the one who sang to us in the dark. You sounded just like her." The crowd murmured uneasily, many of them lowering their eyes. Emma nodded, her lips quivering as she added, "You gave us your blanket. You didn't even have one for yourself. But you wrapped us up so we wouldn't freeze." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "She's a criminal," he snapped. "She doesn't belong with children." But his words sounded hollow now, like they no longer held the same power. The Apache woman slowly knelt as far as her chains would allow, meeting the girls at eye level. Her hands, bruised and trembling, reached out gently, afraid to touch them, but unable to stop herself. Tears slid down her face, cutting through the dust on her cheeks. "No one has ever called me a mother," she said quietly, her voice breaking with every word. The cowboy stared at her, memories flooding his mind of that cold night when he had found this woman outside his broken cabin, singing softly to keep his daughters calm while he was away gathering firewood. He had thought she was only passing through, another lost soul in a harsh land. He never imagined the deep connection she had formed with his children. Around them, the crowd was no longer so sure of their hatred. People who had been ready to cheer for her death now felt a knot of shame in their chests. The girls hugged her tighter, as if sensing that she was slipping away from them. "Please," Emma sobbed, looking up at her father. "We need her. We need a mother." The cowboy swallowed hard, his eyes burning. For the first time since his wife had died, he realized that the woman in chains had given his daughters something he never could: comfort, warmth, and the feeling that they were not alone. A sudden groan cut through the heavy silence, and everyone turned to see a man stumbling out from behind the jailhouse, his face pale and his shirt soaked with blood. He collapsed to his knees, gasping as if every breath was tearing him apart from the inside. The sheriff rushed forward, but the man waved him away weakly, his eyes locked on the Apache woman. "Wait," he croaked. "Don't hang her. She didn't do it." The crowd froze, confusion rippling through them like a sudden storm. The man swallowed hard, wiping blood from his lips as he forced the truth out. "I was the one who killed that traitor," he confessed. "He tried to cheat me, pulled a knife, and I struck first. When the Apache woman came running, she tried to stop me, but I let her take the blame. I was too afraid to speak." His words hung in the air, heavier than the chains that had bound her. A murmur of shock swept through the town. Faces that had been filled with anger now showed fear and disbelief. The sheriff stepped back, his authority crumbling as the truth shattered the story he had built. With trembling hands, he moved toward the Apache woman and unlocked the shackles around her wrists. The metal fell to the ground with a dull clang, a sound that felt like justice finally arriving. The cowboy stepped forward, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing. "You nearly killed an innocent woman," he said, his voice shaking with fury. "A woman who protected my daughters when no one else would." The sheriff could not meet his gaze. The Apache woman stood there free, yet her body still carried the memory of chains. She looked at the cowboy, her eyes filled with pain and quiet strength. "Why did you save my girls?" he asked softly, no longer accusing but searching for understanding. She lowered her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I lost my own children when soldiers burned my village. I couldn't save them. When I saw your daughters cold and crying, I saw their faces again. I couldn't let them suffer." The crowd fell silent, many wiping tears from their eyes. The truth had turned their hatred into shame, and the woman they had called a criminal now stood before them as a grieving mother who had only wanted to protect two lost little girls. The yard was so quiet that even the wind seemed afraid to move as the Apache woman stood there, free at last but unsure of what freedom meant anymore. Her wrists were red and raw where the chains had been, and her eyes were filled with a mixture of hope and fear. She had spent so long being hunted and blamed that the idea of belonging somewhere felt almost impossible. The cowboy slowly stepped toward her, lowering himself to one knee in front of her as if she were the one with all the power in the world. "My daughters don't need someone in chains," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "They need a mother. And so do I." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of years of loneliness and grief. Lucy and Emma ran to her, taking her hands and pressing them against their small hearts. "Come home with us," Lucy whispered. "We don't want anyone else." Emma nodded eagerly, tears sparkling in her eyes. The Apache woman's knees gave way, and she sank to the ground, sobbing as she pulled the girls into her arms. For so long she had carried her sorrow alone, believing that her past had destroyed any chance of love. Now 2 little girls were clinging to her as if she were their whole world, and a man was offering her something she had not dared to dream of: a family. Around them, the people of the town watched in silence. Some felt ashamed of their earlier cruelty, while others felt a strange warmth spreading in their chests as they witnessed a miracle unfolding before their eyes. The sheriff removed his hat and looked down, humbled by what he had almost done. The cowboy gently placed his hand on the woman's shoulder. "You're safe now," he said. "No one will ever put chains on you again." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears, but also with a new light, a quiet trust beginning to grow. as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the dusty yard. The four of them stood together, two wounded souls and two innocent hearts, forming something stronger than fear and hatred. In that moment, the Apache woman was no longer a prisoner or an outcast. She was a mother again, and the cowboy and his daughters were no longer alone. A broken past had finally given way to a future filled with love, healing, and the promise of a new beginning.